Hey everybody, welcome back to the Anointed Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Terry Linscott. Hey, it's great to be with you again today. As we left off last time, we're talking about growth and the necessity of change to sustain growth. And so this is part 2 of that. And we're going to jump into the third and fourth obstacle, as well as 2 things that I think we have to understand as we're going to start changing in our business and our church, in our life, whatever that is. Hey, before we jump into the content today, as I always do, I want to ask you to do a couple of things. First of all, if you've never subscribed to the channel, whether it's a podcast, whatever platform you're listening to it on, or the YouTube, I would ask you to hit the subscribe button, but also hit the bell for every notification. We drop this every other Thursday, and we're going to be adding some special content and new content in 2023 at different dates. And so I would really appreciate that. Second thing would be is what really helps me is if you leave a comment or a review on whatever platform you're listening to this on. We would love to hear from you how the content's adding value to you and it's helping you be a blessing. The third thing, and this is probably one of the most important for me, is that if you'd hit the share button, if this is adding value to your life, if this leadership, these practicalities of leadership are actually helping you, hit that share button. Share it to your social media pages, share it through a text message, whether it's a podcast, a YouTube channel, share it with people that you know that would add value to. Supervisors, managers, pastors of churches, associates, leadership of churches or leadership in businesses, whatever that is, I promise you it would be a blessing to them as much as it is to you, and it'll definitely be a blessing to me. Lastly, before we jump into the content, I want to remind you of my website, terrylinscott.com, and on there's so much there. You can listen to the podcast, you can see the videos through YouTube. You can also request if you'd like for me to come in and speak to your teams, help you as a pastor, help your church leadership, whatever that is, there is a place there to request, as well as a Q&A tab. If you have a question and you'd like for us here at the Anointed Leadership Podcast to answer those for you, we would love to do that. We would do it here, whether anonymously, or we would give you a shout out on that, and hopefully to be a blessing to you. Hey, thanks for taking some time today. Let's jump into the content. And before we do, let's review a little bit. As we left off the last show, we were talking about obstacles to change, obstacles to growth, those types of things. And the first one was, if it isn't broke, don't fix it. That mentality where we're not going to disrupt anything. We don't want to change things. We don't want to, it's running, it's very fluid, but the reality is how fluid it is. It's not enough of a flow to get you to where you're going. So you have to disrupt that right there. But if you don't change the mentality, you'll never go disrupt that. The second thing we dealt with was unnecessary baggage. Our past hurts, our emotional scars, our past failures, our past successes. Those are unnecessary baggages that we bring into the moment of change. And we dealt with those 2 last week. We're going to jump into 3 and 4 today. But before we do, a couple of reminders as we dealt with last week. Number 1, change is inevitable. Progress is optional. You and I have to understand that it's forever changing. The society we live in today, the way we do things is different today. They're trying to shift from gasoline-powered cars over to electric cars. It's a change. It's a shift. It's used to ride on donkeys back in Jesus's day. Now we fly in airplanes. Everything is coming to a head of change. Notice this. Everything today is old. Tomorrow, whatever is created tomorrow, once it's created, it's already old. But so there's always change. There's always something new. They're always bringing out something new. Change is inevitable, but progress and how you adapt to that level of change, progress is up to you. What you want to do, if you want trajectory upward, greater levels of success, that's up to you. And here's what I'm saying is I never change my principles. I'm never changing the doctrine that I preach from my pulpit. I'm never changing the Holy Scriptures. I'm never doing that. And that's never up for a discussion. But what is the methods by which we do them. Those are the things that we're talking about. We never change our principles. We never change our doctrine. We always are willing to change the method. And as long as we stay in the parameters and the safe zone of our belief system, we're going to be okay. Just the method will shift. That's all we have to deal with today is a shift of method. That change, the process, the systems, the strategies, those things are up for change always. We have to choose if we're going to progress, right? Another thought that I said, and I think these are important to hit every time I talk about this level of change, is this: the greatest enemy to your future success is your current success. What you're doing now, the success you're having, staying in a place of complacency because you're excited about where you are rather than on the way to where you're going. You always have to enjoy today, but you've got to see that you're going somewhere else further. You as the leader, if you are the senior leader, you must allow yourself to adjust and change and grow as an individual in the leadership, grow in the vision, grow in the area and the place that you're headed to. You've got to grow. If not, you are the lid to your organization. Pastor, you're the lid to your church. If you don't have a level of leadership that people want to follow, the ones that are following you are all that you're going to have. If you don't change your mindset, if you don't adjust the way you're going, if you don't grow, then you're the lid. There's always change happening, and change is required for greater growth and sustainment. Here's a few thoughts, just a couple more. Believing that what has always been done will always work. That's a problem, in my opinion, is you can never always use the same methods. You cannot do it that way anymore. It's like the phone book, right? So the other day I got a phone book mailed to me. First of all, I thought, why am I getting a phone book? Everything I need is on the internet. It's all on Google. It's all on my phone today. And the phone books used to be like 3 inches thick, Today it was like a 1/2 inch thick. That's all the paper that was in it. That's all the numbers that are in it. Again, if all I would have relied on is that phone book, that's where I would be in trouble today. I've got to be willing to get into that next phase. If I want information, I want growth, I want the ability to move forward. You can't, believing what's always worked will always work. That is a problem, and you got to eliminate that mindset. I talked about it this way, is what change is. Change to me, it's not an easy process, but it's easy. The process is difficult, but to change is easy for Terry. Why? Because Terry's mind I have established in my mind that I'm not going to stay stuck where I am, and where I'm going is much more lucrative, much more beneficial, much more beautiful than where I'm at today. And so I'm always thinking ahead. I'm not necessarily thinking for today. I think great leaders, and all great leaders, were visionary, and they always saw where we're going rather than where we're at. And what we have to realize is that change, though it's not going to be easy in the process or the journey, it should be easy for a leader to understand. And here's the reason, is I've learned this: change is hard for most people because they overestimate the value of what we have, where we are. And they underestimate the value of where we're going and what we may gain. And so we have to change the value on what we put. I'm excited about where Abundant Life Church is. I'm excited about where Terry is in leadership, but I'm not content because I know there's so much more, not just for me, but for that through me that God wants to do. Remember, the anointed leadership, what God gets on me to do what God's called me to do. There's greater that I can touch, more people that I can impact. And that's my heart. That is my heart. And so if I overestimate where I'm at and I think, man, this is amazing, I can't believe I'm here, then I'm underestimating where God's going to take me. And I'm always looking out there. And so challenge yourself. It's hard because of that one reason, in my opinion, right? In change, and this is another reason why it might be a little bit difficult, is because some people don't like disruption. They don't like disrupting anything. They don't like it when it's uncomfortable. They don't like when it's unsettled. They just don't. And disruption is not a threat. You and I have to realize that disruption is not a threat. It's actually an invitation to new heights. And I talked about the big box store like Walmart. They shift things around. Why? Because they increase sales. They increase the time that you're in the store. And the longer that you're in the store, the more you're probably going to buy. And you have to sift through every aisle. That's a disruption, but actually is an increase to them. And it doesn't really run people off because we all go back to that same store of frequency because we're people of habit, even in the level of disruption. So we're okay with that. And people are okay with that. And you have to realize that it's okay, right? And what I mean by that is this: the disruption is, and I use this example, is that you go from settled unsettled, or comfortable to uncomfortable, to chaotic, which is a good place, back to unsettled or uncomfortable, and then to settled or comfortable. And that is what we have to look at. That's the path. That's the pattern of change, and be okay with it, right? And you got to realize there's never going to be change without disrupting what's going on today, what's the present. You must disrupt the present if you're actually going to experience change. So let's jump into this. Obstacles to growth or obstacles to change. And the first one, again, let me repeat it. Number one is, if it isn't broke, don't fix it, the mentality. You have to eliminate that mentality. Number two is unnecessary baggage. And you and I have to deal with that unnecessary baggage. And it's the things that we bring into where we're at today. And we've got to deal with that. The third one is this: assuming change will come easy. This is assuming that it's going to come easy. You and I think because you mapped it out in your head, you wrote it down on strategy, you put it into paper, and you think that it's going to be real easy to do. No, the process of establishing what needs to change might be easy, but the implementation is going to be difficult. We have to realize that. Not everybody's going to buy into that. Not everybody's going to buy into the system. They're not going to buy into the newness of it. You have to realize that the reason is because change, it disrupts the status quo. It disrupts what we always do. It's not going to be easy because people are comfortable. Remember, I talked about comfortable, uncomfortable, chaotic, uncomfortable, comfortable. This is why it is not easy. You have to go into it understanding. I believe that if you understand that change, it's going to disrupt the status quo and it's not going to be as easy as you think it is, it actually gives you a peace of mind to be able to deal with, as well as give grace and mercy to the people around you that are helping you get where you're going. Notice this: you cannot be successful without other people around you. No one's did it on their own. No one individual has become successful by themselves. It takes a village. It takes people around you to walk the journey with you. And you're getting ready to disrupt the status quo, what it's always done, how we've always done it. But if you don't disrupt the status quo, you will always have what you always have. You'll never get more than what you do have, and you'll never see great growth nor sustained growth without some levels of change. Change, and here's what I mean by it's not easy. It's not just a one thing. You're not going to, if you implement a new process, whatever that process is, if you implement a new system, you're not just implementing a system, you are creating a domino effect of disruption throughout every team, every department, every level of entity, or every level of leadership or teams or levels of authority throughout the whole organization. If I implement one level of change and I think that it's okay, now everybody else around me is going to experience disruption in a different level, in a different mindset. It's a domino effect. Everything you change creates disruption on down the line as well as up the line. So this is why it's not easy, is because you've got to map out levels of change and where it's going to affect. And if it's going to affect, how do I support that team, that individual, that entity, that I'm able to say, yes, I know it's going to affect you, but we're going to work through that process. We're going to see that right there. It's also not going to be easy. Watch, number one, because you disrupted the status quo. Two, every level of change is a domino effect down the line or up. And three is because not everyone else is going to be excited about change. You, the leader. For Terry, I'm so excited what's happening over the last couple of months at Abundant Life Church. We're creating new systems. We're creating processes. We're doing things. We're mapping out processes and who's responsible, who gets the reward from it, how it looks, how do we implement it, how do we do it. We're tightening up the levels of communication, but not everybody's excited. You know why? Because I'm telling them they're going to have to change. And they didn't invite the change. They didn't willingly change. I did as the leader. And it's okay. If I'm the leader and I establish that we're changing, I also have to understand that not everybody around me is going to be excited. Some will, not everybody. And that's why it's not easy, because you don't want to lose the individual. You want to keep them on board with you so that what their value and what they bring to the team is still going to be great and it's going to be exciting, but we understand they're going to take some time to digest it as well as implement it into their life and in their work process. The fourth thing, so number one, you got to get rid of it. If it isn't broke, don't fix it mentality. Number two, the unnecessary baggage. Number 3, assuming, these are obstacles again, assuming that change will come easy. Just because you see it in your mind as a leader, and I do this a lot. I see it, man, it'll be easy. This is easy to do. Just do it this way. It's going to be fun. It's not necessarily that way. And number 4, watch this, abandoning the efforts way too quickly. Yeah, it's like we're excited and then we hit a wall. And this is what we're talking about. We quit too early on what we want to change, knowing that when we make the change, sustained growth and increase is able to be seen and experienced. And so you abandon it too early, and what we have to do is deal with that, right? Here's why we abandon it early, I believe, is unrealistic expectations of time frame for the results. It's an unrealistic expectation, is I think that I can do this in a month. Yeah, it's not going to be that way. When we sat down and we reevaluated and I began to work on the business of the ministry or on the church ministry or how we do the administration and the daily operations, my thought was, man, this will be pretty quick. And then I realized the amount of effort and time it's going to take to put into what we have to do. I can't put a time frame of 2 months. You're looking like 6 to 9 months down the road before we actually get everything in, we get everything working, we get everything moving, and we're now able to sustain growth and go there. By the way, I'm wanting it done quicker because that's the type of person I am. But I realize that I'll abandon it early if I thought it would only take 2 months and I don't see a result. I have to allow the mindset of what is the realistic expectation of the time frame. If I don't, then I'll quit efforts because I expected it to be done way too early, right? And if I'm expecting it done way too early, means I'm not giving enough effort to really dive in and divide through and ensure that everything is covered. The second thing is why we abandon it early, in my opinion, is when results don't happen quick enough, we lose the effort and we stop progress. It's not just having an unrealistic expectation, is even if we have a realistic expectation and the result isn't what we wanted the first few times, now we just like, well, I guess it's not going to work. We missed it and we just quit. No, you don't. You have a system. You have a plan. You know where you're going. You've talked it through. You put the processes down. It's going to take time for it to grab. It's going to take time for everybody to buy in. You're going to have to realize that if you abandon it too quickly, you're going to slow or stop the progress, which means you'll never see it. You'll never see that happen. You'll never sustain that growth. You'll never see that level of change that you're expecting. You will allow those that kick against the goads, that kick against the pricks to win, and you'll go back and do what you've always done. It was what Jesus told Saul in the road to Damascus. It's tough to kick against the goads. In other words, keep doing what you're doing, but you're never going to find fulfillment. You got to make a change in your life, a conversion, and it's going to take time for the conversion so that you can go do everything that God's called you to do. You're going to have to make some changes in there. The third thing in this that we abandon it way too quickly is this: when attempts fail, we lose heart and give up. So we try it one time, it didn't work. No, when you fall, get back up. When you fall, get back up. We say that all the time. But a lot of times when it fails the first time, we try to go back to the drawing board. We look at that failure and say, what did we do wrong? Where should we have fixed? And now we want to change everything we've done just because of one failure. Failure is not final. It is okay to fail. Stay true to the systems, stay true to the processes, and continue pushing forward. Don't abandon it because you failed one time, because it didn't work one time. Keep pressing through. Keep pressing in. Don't quit. It's an obstacle to change, which when you are growing, you've got to change. Hey, let me read through them one more time. Number one, you got to get rid of the mentality, if it isn't broken, don't fix it. That's the mentality you got to deal with. Unnecessary baggage, number 2. Number 3, assuming change will come easy. Number 4 is an obstacle is abandoning your efforts way too early. And so we got to really establish these 4 things, identify them. Now, I would think there's probably a lot more obstacles, but I think these are the 4 primary ones that I've watched in my own ministry, in my own church, and in my own life for 30 years, and looking at that. So what I want you to challenge you is this. Don't just make change to make change. So we got the 4 obstacles. I'm going to give you 2 thoughts, right, about administering change. What does it look like? Because again, you can't sustain new growth doing everything the same way you've always done. You've got to increase. You've got to adjust some things. So to administer change, there's 2 primary things I think that need to be done. And number 1, you have to realize this, is you have to understand the forces of change. What is causing change? What does it look like? What does that change look like? How are you why am I needing to change? Why do I have to do this? So here's an example. When I go from 170 people to 500 people, there's a force of change that's necessary in and out of our ministry. It forces change inside staff and an increasing of personnel. It forces change on membership. It forces change to increase standards. It forces change on the level of trust because you don't know people. It forces change. That's a growth that forces change. What about an internal change? What about if I lose a staff member? That forces change. It requires change, right? So, or let's say that internally, financially, we're hurting. Now it's forced change internally because financially we can't sustain the level of a person. You've got to determine and understand what forces the change in your ministry and forcing the change in your business. When you understand it, then you attack the things that support that area, whether it's internal or it's external, right? You must first grasp before you can change. Why is it necessary to change? What are we missing? This is what understanding the forces. You got to sit down and ask the question, why must I change? Why must I change this? Why must I change that? Why must I change here? And why must I change there? Without doing this understanding, without gaining this understanding, it's going to be completely difficult to craft or draft a plan that addresses the root concerns and pressing questions that we have to realize. You can't draft it. You can't create strategies unless you understand the why. What is it? What is driving this need for change? For me, it was twofold. Number 1, it was external. It was external growth of numbers coming into our church that I had to make changes based upon because I realized it's not working the way it used to work. We can't do what we always did. The second thing was an internal change, which meant I went from 4 staff members to 11 staff members, some paid, some volunteer, and they're here daily. Those are 2 areas that I have to address change. And when you add 6 members to the staff, when you add that, now the way you always communicated things, the way you always made decisions changes because not everybody has the same level of authority to make a decision. So now I have to understand, where do I need to shift and change? So some of the changes that I'm making is making internally, which is my staff, and the processes so everybody's clear on who does what and who's responsible for what, because there's a lot of overlaps inside the staff and inside leadership. But then there's also this idea of how do I handle the people and how do I sustain that growth and how do I make them, for lack of a better word, and please excuse and understand my heart as a pastor, is how do I make them comfortable to follow me? How do I make it a relational effort? How do I make a relational effort to connect to every person that comes to Abundant Life Church? And I am their pastor. Well, how do I use my staff to do that? And these are levels of change that we have to understand. You understand the forces that causes you to change. It's either internal or external, and you will handle them different, right? You also have to understand what pressures are driving the change. Is it people pressure? Is it peer pressure? Is it financial pressure? Is it the vision pressure? What is it that is driving that right there? And so what you have to understand is by understanding these factors, that this is what makes the change necessary, you'll be better suited to address them. You can address them internally or you can address them externally. I'm telling you, internally is going to be so much easier than it is externally, because those that are on your staff, those that work with you every single day, whether they're paid or unpaid, those people that are with you every day in that organization, in that church as a pastor, that will be the easiest area to address. Why? Because you can work directly with them. You have influence and impact. The external changes are going to be the ones that are going to be a little bit more difficult because you may have influence, but you don't necessarily have impact. So you have to understand, how do I do this? And then you got to manage it in both ways, right? So here's the thing. The first thing is about administering change. Number one, you must understand the forces that are driving that, internal or external. The second thing you must do is understand the process of change. What does change look like? We talked about timelines, we talked about unrealistic expectations, but what is the process of change, right? Here's what you have to realize. There are no two change initiatives are the same. Nobody's the same. My church, your church. My business, your business. Whatever that is, no two change initiatives, whatever it is, are going to be identical. They're not going to be the same. So you got to understand, if there's a process, it's not going to be the same initiative. It's not going to be the same way in every area. Internally is going to be different than externally, and vice versa. You got to understand that if you're going to understand the process. Don't think. Now, you might have a system that helps you with change. You might have a platform that you can plug and play in, and that helps you with that level of change. But the reality is the initiatives are not going to be the same. Watch, you got to realize this. So understand the process. Here's the thing. All change processes start with a starting point, right? And B, an ending point. It's the journey. How do you get there from A to B? How do you get there? You got to realize there's a starting and an ending, and you're going to have to identify that because it involves multiple steps that are typically grounded into 3 stages in my opinion. 3 steps in 3 stages. So step 1 of understanding the process is this: preparation. You got to sit down, you got to prepare, you got to talk, you got to have freedom, free conversations. You got to understand where people are at. You got to prepare the organization, the whole church, but you also got to prepare the employees. So what I did is I started at the employee sector and had a roundtable conversation and said, we got problems, we got complexity. How do we fix it? Everybody at the employees table had an opportunity to share. Then we went into the department heads, and it's something we're involved in as I speak. That now I'm going into the organization, from employees to organization. And once the organization, that level of leadership inside of it, I'm going to be able to go into everybody else. But it's a stepping stone. It's preparation of both employees and organization, right? You got to help the employees understand the need for impending transitions. You got to help people understand, why do we have to do this? And you've got to almost like sell that to them. You've got to promote that to them so they understand that. Then you have to outline the vision and the plan to achieve it. You have to. So you have to have some things. We've got to do this right here because of where we're going, and this is how we're going to get there. You have to do that. That's preparation. You can't start without preparation. The more you drive that into their heart, the more you drive that into their head. Hey, the senior leader, pastor, get your team around you, and you know where you need to change. They already know it, by the way. But you know where you need to change, and if you will prepare them, if you'll point the vision, here's the plan, and this is the reason why, they'll buy into that. That's number 1 is preparation. Number 2 is you got to have implementation. And this is where you have to execute the plan, and it takes time. This is the journey. Here, watch. Comfortable, uncomfortable, chaos. So here's where chaos really sets in, is in implementation, because people are now changing the way they've always done it. They're learning something new. It's taking time. They're irritated. They're frustrated. They're mad. They're complaining. All of these different things. But if you change your mindset and you help them change their mindset, chaos, though it's good and it's hard, it will completely move back to uncomfortable. They'll get it, and now it start working. The implementation is going to be the second part of the process, but it will be your best one as they do that, right? You've got to realize that. The third thing about right here, about the 3 stages of change: preparation, implementation, and here's the thing: follow through. This is where now we've got it. We just got to do it this way. Don't revert back to the old way of doing things. It's focusing on ensuring that change sticks and becomes embedded in the ministry, in the business, in the company's culture. It's part of our culture and our practices. That's follow through. You have to ensure that we keep doing it. What we just adjusted to is now our standard. It's the only way we do it. It's how we do it. It's the platform by which we do it. Why? Because when you understand these three stages and you implement, you'll find great levels of growth. Hey, let me review this. I hope this stuff is helping you today. 4 obstacles and 2 administrative necessities that we need to understand. Number 1, the 4 obstacles. If it isn't broken, don't fix it mentality. It's an obstacle. Unnecessary baggage. It's an obstacle. Assuming change will be easy. It's an obstacle. Abandoning the efforts too quickly. That's an obstacle. But here's how you administer it. You've got to understand this. 2 things. Understand the forces that changes you. What are forcing you to change? Internal, external, and also understand the process of change. It's going to take a time. It's going to be a journey. Listen, I hope this content's helping you. I hope that as you implement change into your business, into your church, into whatever it is you're doing in your life, understanding change is inevitable, progress is optional. I challenge you to go change. Make some adjustments to sustain the great growth that's coming to you over the next 3 years, and you watch the anointing of God get on you as you make the changes, and you'll see greater sustainment in your growth. Till next time, I call you blessed. I'm Terry Linscott, and I am the host of the Anointed Leadership Podcast.